Hi everyone, and welcome back to Real Estate Unlocked, your go-to mini-series where we break down everything you need to know about buying and selling a home. In today's episode, we're talking about Section 19, binding nature of this contract in the Manitoba Offer to Purchase. This is the final section of the contract and it ties everything together. This section is a little different from the other sections that we've covered because Section 19 only appears in Part 2 of the offer. There's no matching section in Part 1. Even though it's short, it carries an important message. So let's break it down. So Section 19 confirms that once an offer is accepted, it becomes a legally binding contract between the buyer and the seller. At that point, the terms written in the offer to purchase are no longer just a proposal. They become a legal agreement that both parties are responsible for following. It explains that the contract is binding, not only on the buyer and the seller themselves, but also on their heirs, their executors, administrators, successors, and assigns. I know that sounds like a lot of legal language, but what it really means is that the obligations of the contract don't just disappear if circumstances change. So for example, if the property becomes part of an estate or ownership is transferred through another legal process. This just ensures that the agreement remains enforceable and that the responsibilities connected to the contract carry forward where appropriate. So Section 19 reminds both buyers and sellers to read Part 1 and Part 2 before signing the contract. Part 1 contains all the specific terms of the deal, things like price, possession date, conditions, etc., while Part 2 contains the standard legal terms and protections that apply to the agreement. Together, both of these parts form and complete the contract. So this section encourages buyers and sellers to seek professional advice if they have questions about the property or about any of the terms, conditions, promises, representations, or warranties contained in the contract. Real estate transactions often involve multiple professionals working together, including realtors, lawyers, lenders, and other advisors, to make sure that everything is handled properly. Finally, this section confirms that both Part 1 and Part 2 must be signed by each party. So if there's more than one buyer or there's more than one seller, then each party must sign both parts. This ensures that the contract is properly executed and legally enforceable. So Section 19 is the final step that confirms the offer to purchase becomes a legally binding agreement once it's accepted and signed. It brings together everything we've discussed throughout this series and officially turns the offer into a contract. That brings us to the end of the Manitoba Offer to Purchase. If you've been following along with this series, you now have a full understanding of how the contract works, from the first section all the way to final signatures. If you found this series helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow along for more real estate education and insights. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.